It is I, the slayer of posers, master of disaster, grim one to all, the necro sexual. So all the perverts on the internet are probably asking themselves, Mr. Necro, how did you get into heavy metal? Well, funny you ask. You see, I've always said, it's not a phase I'm going through, Dad. And it's pretty true because my father bought me the Black Album when I turned 12. Unwittingly creating a monster, he planted the seed in my mind with Metallica's Black Album. And then I turned 14 after listening to Metallica for a few years. So I think my father finally believes me when I say, it's not a phase I'm going through, Dad. I asked my best friend to get me Rain and Blood for my 14th birthday, and he delivered the goods. And as soon as I heard the opening scream in Angel of Death, you know the part where it's like, ah! I was hooked on the heavy metal madness. And the rest, as they say, is history.
So I'm at the mall as a 14-year-old kid looking for something heavy. I listened to Guns N' Roses and Motley Crue, things of that nature. Go to the music store where they actually have a metal section, which was unusual because a lot of the music stores in our area, all the metal was lumped in with the rock and all of that. I'm looking through the CDs. I'm checking out Iron Maiden, thinking about giving this band a try. And I was looking through and looked at some of the album covers, and I picked the one that looked the coolest. So that ended up being Number the Beast. And I was hooked, man. I took it home, put it in my little Discman, put on my headphones, and from those opening notes of Invaders, like I was just taken to another world. And because of that, like I had started playing guitar earlier that year, and that just totally developed me as a guitar player because I learned basically how to play guitar with songs like Hallowed Be Thy Name. And so I started playing Metallica and things like that, and of course I got heavier and heavier as the years went on, but Iron Maiden, Number the Beast is where it all began.
The first metal hard rock album that I picked up with my own money, I saved up my allowance and bought a cassette version of Appetite for Destruction by Guns N' Roses off of my sister. She had purchased it just to get, I think it was Sweet Child of Mine or Paradise City, one of the singles, right? Saved up my allowance and I gave her $5 for a used copy of that. That is the earliest memory recollection that I have of purchasing a metal album or a hard rock album with my own money. That album to me is still a classic. It's an excellent album for road trips and mandatory sing-alongs, of course. You know, I was actually exposed to metal through MTV back when they played music videos. Headbangers Ball and all that. I found out about, you know, lots of great bands, Guns N' Roses, Skid Row, Metallica. You know, I just went from there. I started buying magazines and checking out the t-shirts that the bands I liked, that those guys represented, and checking out the bands that were in the Rockabilia distribution. Just took it from there. Been lifelong since then. I think I was probably 7, maybe younger when I got Appetite for Destruction.
The first record I ever got was Destroyer by Kiss on February 14th, 1977. February 14th, 1977, it was Valentine's Day. I was 7 years old, and for Valentine's Day, my parents gave me a present. It was a copy of Kiss Destroyer. I had an old RCA record player, and I would look at the album cover, and that was my first introduction to heavy music, Kiss. I think I also listened to Peter Frampton around the same time, but that was my first introduction to heavy music. I didn't really get into heavy metal until about 1982 when I discovered Judas Priest, Screaming for Vengeance. I saw the album at a record store, and I went and I saved up my paper route money. I bought the album. The cover looked cool. I'd never heard the band, and the album blew me away. Still one of my favorite albums. I think it's one of Judas Priest's greatest records. I got to see them on tour in 1984. That was a monumental experience for me. I've been a heavy metal fan ever since, and a part of the metal community. And I think being in the music industry, playing in bands as a kid, devoting my life to music really saved me. I might just be in jail otherwise. I mean, that's a cliche, but I think it's true. I grew up in a little crappy town in northern Saskatchewan. What were you supposed to do, right? So as soon as I could, I moved away from Saskatchewan to a larger city and started working in the music industry, playing in bands, and I credit metal for taking me down this path.
Yeah, I remember having this school trip in the UK for a week, and there I bought 3 records, which were the debut album from Slipknot, White Pony from Deftones, and probably Limp Bizkit, I don't know which one, probably Significant Other or something. From these 3, I'm only listening still to White Pony. I mean, Deftones is one of my favorite bands. White Pony is probably in my top 3 records of all time. This is one of the most relevant bands in metal still nowadays for me. And and then another record that really moved me was the Last Tour on Earth from Marilyn Manson. I remember because we had this local record shop here, and I was going there every now and then, and I could always see this record with this cross on fire, and back I was 14, I was pretty innocent somehow, and this was kind of scaring me for some reasons. So it took me a couple of weeks, I think, before making the move and buying the record, thinking I did something wrong. And yeah, from then on it was just I opened to all this kind of extreme music, because it was extreme for me back then, of course. Even though it was later on, I discovered Breach, the Swedish band, mainly through my drummer Luke, and also through Robin from The Ocean, because The Ocean is a band that was and is very much inspired by Breach, and this was a whole new world again. I discovered Breach, and then Cursed, and this whole aggressive mid-range hardcore that I had a hint with Converge years before that. But now seeing that there were all these bands and discovering this this music that was all about attitude and I don't know, that changed everything again, because though I spent when I was into this hardcore era learning guitar and stuff, I worked a lot on my technique and stuff, and if I would have kept that, maybe now I would just sweep around and playing one of these progressive which is fine, but I felt much more attracted to this aggressive and urgent music where you could feel there was a purpose, not by sending any kind of message or political statements or anything, but just it was just there, and it's
there were actually 3 definitive moments. The first one was when I discovered Kiss in Brazil in 1982. That's what got me into metal in the first place. And the second one was in 1986, also in Brazil, when I discovered this record shop in Rio called Point Rock, and they had all the latest extreme metal records there. So it was like a point. It was a place where people went to meet and listen. You could listen to records there. We would spend hours there. So I discovered tons and tons of bands all at once, during the summer, and then went back to America where I lived with a list of albums, and then and that's when I got into Creator and Slayer and Destruction and Sodom and Venom and everyone all at the same time, 1986. And then while living in America, about 1991, well actually it was 1990, I discovered the underground metal scene in Virginia, mostly death metal. And that was the first time that I realized that there was such a thing as an underground scene, I guess like a metal community, a network of metal musicians and enthusiasts. That was the first time. So from there, like I had an epiphany that I wanted to be a part of that scene and get get demos and find out about bands before everyone else, and that kind of thing.
I think I was about 14 or 15 years old, and I was listening to whatever there was on the radio. I wasn't so very much interested in music, and a friend of mine told me, you have to listen to this band, and gave me The Trooper by Iron Maiden, and I listened to it, and I was shocked and overwhelmed, and I listened to it like 10 times on repeat every day. This one song until...
I think it's the same for
It's the same for everyone, I think, because everybody is a friend.
Everybody has a friend.
Yeah,
who
he's
has a
coming
friend,
with some
yeah.
tape or CD and tell him, you have to listen to this music, it's something you don't know. For me it was, I was 16 years old, it was 1993 I think. And my friend came with me in the tape of Iron Maiden, The Number of the Beast, and told me, yeah, you have to listen to this and something else. I put this and I said, what the hell, the sound, the guitar, and then he's coming with a videotape, VHS, and I saw the videos, it was amazing. I think everybody is the same.
It's like that, yeah. For me it was Lamb of God, actually, not Iron Maiden, and I was really overwhelmed by the guitars and the drums and everything, but I thought the singer was sick or something, because I didn't understand what's going on with this growling.
It was like
growling.
It was like that when I first heard Cradle of Filth. It was like, what the hell is going on?
The music is good, but why is screaming all the yeah.
But now it's really extreme, all the way through Mayhem and Behemoth.
Yeah, and Emperor and Slayer, of course. We are big fans of Slayer. And yeah, thank you.
I think when I joined Aralu, it was really when I entered the metal
world.
scene. Yeah, the metal scene in Israel and the whole world of metal, because I think a month or two before I joined Aralu, I thought I could never play blast beats.
I think for me it's something different, because in 2003 my brother was kidnapped by some guerrilla organization in Colombia, and then I fly there and start to looking for him and meet some people, and it was by the spirit of this music, the braveness and the guts to do it and go to meet people and looking for him, and all the time I'm listening to
in this war zone.
It's a war zone, yeah, exactly, and it was really, then I really understand that the power of this music is give you some, I don't know how to explain it. It's give you something that you can find other place, and when I coming back from there, I understand that everything was inspired by this music.
I was in the right time, in the right moment, the right age. It was the start of the 90s, and I just played rock and rock guitar, and I listened to 70s rock and Deep Purple and some Queen and stuff like that. And then Guns N' Roses and Metallica exploded, and MTV started pumping out metal tunes, and underground scene started. I think the band Salem started it in Israel, and there were Amexes and all different Morgue and stuff, and we went to see those bands, and that's how it started growing and growing. The first time I saw a band, a major band live, which is not one of our local band, and that day, no internet, and you couldn't see how live performances are, and you heard cassettes and, bootlegs, and it doesn't give you the impact of what is happening, of the sheer volume and ferocity you get when you're inside, and it was Napalm Death. And I thought, all our local bands are ripping it, it's cool, they can do it, and it's exactly like the records. I said, they sound like Paltrow. Yeah, man. But when I saw Napalm Death, I was like, it was the sound of darkness. Big Marshall amps. The volume was insane. I never heard something so loud. The bass was thundering. The moshing was ferocious. People got thrown all over the place. There were actually people got hurt. And I was like, that's something I want to do. That's something I want to hear more. And for me, that was the definitive moment that I started listening to heavier and more aggressive, and it pushed me to like play harder music on my guitar, and took off from there.
Well, I remember being a young boy, maybe like even 4 or 5 years old, and my friend at the time, his father was into. I remember seeing the cover of Iron Maiden, Number of the Beast, and I remember being drawn to the artwork, and that was pretty scary for me as a 4 or 5 year old boy. Fast forward maybe 6 or 7 years, and I remember starting to get into rock music and listening to Bon Jovi and Def Leppard and like rock bands. And then a friend of mine gave me the CD, a tape for Live After Death, Iron Maiden. And I remember being like, the first time really that I remember being like sort of like a little bit intimidated by music, like thinking, oh my god, this is too much. And because at that point in time that sounded really extreme to me. Since then it's been a quest on finding just finding an edge in different types of different bands within heavy music. That's been an interesting journey, which obviously has brought me to playing as well, because I wanted to try and create a band that had an edge. And probably the moment when I started getting into heavy music was that when I first listened to Iron Maiden.